I wish that I had realized at the very beginning what was going on. I wish I'd have caught her a little earlier at this. I wish I'd have been a little more open to what this could be, what's going on. I think a lot of people just normally attribute those signs to natural aging, you know, the natural aging process. I don't think I remember as much as I used to, you know.
Toward the end of my mother's experience, we became much more savvy in dealing with it than we were at the beginning, where we were just, you know, stumbling in the dark. And then handling my dad, we were very experienced and knew, you know, where to take him and what to do and what not to do. That's as important to learn as what to do as what not to do.
Oh, arguing, you know, making an issue of anything. I wish now that, you know, I hadn't made comments that you make when you think somebody is doing this on purpose. Now that you know he's not doing it on purpose, that this is all part of the disease, just don't make the nasty comment. Keep it to yourself and realize it's the disease that's working on him. But
the things that have not worked is to try to prove that I'm right. I can't argue with them. Absolutely cannot argue with them. And most times I can't even reason with them. It just isn't there. It's not going to work. And I'll hear when we go out with groups of people that don't know him. I mean, he can be anywhere from vice president of General Electric to a mailman. It depends on what the conversation is. And I have to bite my tongue on that one. But now most people that were around, they know him. And they just kind of, because the story gets a little scrambled as he goes on. And they kind of look, and if they don't know he's got Alzheimer's, I'll just have to pull him aside and say, he's got Alzheimer's, just go with it. Just whatever he says. He rides in private planes, let him go. He doesn't know. Or in his mind he did. But for my release for that, I don't know, I hold an awful lot in. And then I scream or I cry or do the typical woman thing. But if it works for him and our house is peaceful, then I'm peaceful. If he's upset, and I have to learn to just back away, because he won't remember why he's upset. And he really probably has, it's just like a child pouting. That's all it is. And it's so not the way he was.
He always paid the bills. He handled the investments. So I also learned you should never do that. You should be a lot more involved in what's going on. And now all of that falls to me. I mean, he wouldn't understand what the accountant was saying, or so yes, the house, everything.
Yeah, my dad, number one concern was if he moved my mom into a facility, she would be miserable and just shut down, and that he would be very, very guilty over that. And it was the exact opposite. As soon as he moved her into a facility, she lit up. She was around people. She wasn't home alone, you know, just staring out the window. She was engaged and active, and her health got better. You know, mentally she didn't get better, but she was happier, and physically she was better, and she was more active, and that was the exact right move, was moving her into that type of facility that she went into. And with my dad, we learned to do as much as he's willing to let you do, but don't constantly fight him. Okay, it's his journey. Let him go at his own pace, and just kind of be around and helping where you can and where he'll let you help. But don't always intervene and try to tell him what to do and you know, beat him up over every little thing, because that just aggravates the situation. Sometimes you just got to step back and let him make a mistake or let him forget something, if the overall effect is he's going to be better off and happier and more content.
Well, I can't go to help him on his arm. You know, when I'm with him and we're walking, and if I go to help him get up from a chair, he will not allow it. I can do it on my own. I do it on my own. And it's difficult for him. This beautiful, agile man, dancer, everything. Finding it difficult. But he gets up, and then if I go to help him, he says, "Leave me alone." And I said, "Okay, Tom." I just thought maybe I give you a hand, but I'll just hold your hand. He said, "Yeah, that's fine." Then we hold hands and walk back. But if I try to help him on his arm to help him up, it does not work. It does not.
So that's a good example of trying to help, yet you need to draw that line of preserving his dignity.
Exactly. That's preserving his dignity.
Telling him too many things in a row. Okay, we're going to physical therapy. And then he balked at that. So I said, I know, but as soon as physical therapy's over, then we're going to go to, then we will go to Dillard's because you want to look for shoes, and then we'll stop at Aurelio's and we'll have pizza. Well, now, please. He was still on physical therapy, and I've got him eating pizza for dinner. So, you know, I know that's wrong. I know it's supposed to be one thing at a time. Didn't learn my lesson very well.
Yes, I did. I felt in the beginning that the more he could do for himself and the longer he could do it, it would be better for him. But it didn't take long for me to realize that it was only frustrating him really, really badly. And I decided that I wasn't going to force these things on him. I was going to do them. Now, sometimes when I do them now, he gets mad at me and he says, I could have, that's one thing I could have done for you. But frankly, between you and me, I can do it faster, easier, with no explanation. It's just easier for me. But I understand where he's coming from, so I don't eliminate everything, but it is easier for me just to do it myself.
But he was so out of sorts yesterday, and we had to go back to the doctors. And he woke up and he was fine, then he fell asleep and he woke up and he was nasty. And we walked in the doctor's office, the poor little receptionist behind the desk took one look at him because he was just glaring at her. He was just plain nasty. And it was like, oh, Walter. But I've learned that you can't say, stop that, because then it gets worse.
Well, the rule of does it really matter is terribly important, because I always, throughout my life probably, made an issue out of things that weren't worth making an issue out of, rather than let them roll off my back. And finally I got to the point where in Shirley's battle, that I put signs up around the house that said, Joe, ask yourself, does it really matter? Because I was giving her, bugging her, I should say, on things that didn't matter, that weren't important, rather than have the patience to work around the situation, rather than to try to force my will or my perceived needs at the time. An example would be to try to get her out of the house to go to a doctor or something like that. She would refuse to go, and I would struggle with it, get sometimes not physically forceful, but not far from it. And then I realized one day, quite accidentally, that if I backed off and didn't press the issue, she oftentimes would do exactly what I wanted without ever knowing that or remembering that I had tried to push her into it in the first place. A dramatic example of that is one day I really was upset with her about it, and I pushed her, then the phone rang, I got distracted, I came back and she's standing by the door saying, when are we leaving? And everything I ever learned was the hard way.
When the hallucinations began, I don't think I acted the way I was taught here at the Alzheimer support group, at least not for the first time. And then I sort of stopped and took stock of what was happening, and I would just defer him to something else. I wouldn't argue with him and say, there's nobody out there that you're talking to. I would never, after the first time, try to get into his mind and change him and correct him. And I learned that here because it just didn't come naturally. I learned it here.
So you thought if you tell him that it wasn't real,
Right.
then he would learn it or he would accept it?
He would accept it.
But it never did
It
happen.
never happened.
Was it
And
hard to go into his world?
No, I sort of went with the flow. He was talking to somebody on the lanai, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and for just a split second I became very anxious, and I was standing in my bedroom door, and then it occurred to him to say, Louis, I'm so cold, if you could just close the door. And like that, he came out of it, closed the door, came into bed, and that was the end of it. So I learned to sort of go with him, you know, and not argue or anything, you know.
Oh my goodness.
And when he called the police on me, he called the police and said, I didn't know what they said. I think I was at a meeting here, and when I came home, our caregiver made me a cup of tea, and there was a knock on the door. There were 2 policemen there with their guns in their holster, saying that somebody was being beat up and everything was being stolen. And I said, well, I've reported that my husband has Alzheimer's or a dementia. Well, we know that, they said, but by law, we have to come. So I said, Louis, there's somebody here to visit you. And out he came and saw the policeman, and he apologized to them, and then he went and apologized to our caregiver.
Every day, 100 times every day, I do something that I say, why did I do that? I know that doesn't work, and yet I just did it again. So I don't know if I can give somebody else advice that I don't even take myself, because it's like, Aunt, you know that doesn't work, but you repeatedly do it again and again.